Joining me now is Ruth London from the campaign group Fuel Poverty Action. Ruth, this must really worry you about what people who already struggle to pay their bills, and, you know, we hear about heating or eating. I mean, this must really concern you and the people that you campaign on behalf of.
Well, I'm shocked to hear people talking about it being uncomfortable. The fact is that people will die. Even before these price rises and before the pandemic, there were about 10,000 people a year in this country dying because they couldn't keep their homes warm. And that is scandalous. People are not expendable that way. And not only die, but it pays havoc with people's lives, people's relationships, people's work, people's studies. You know, if you can't keep warm, you can't keep the lights on, you can't keep connected, you can't cook your food, you can't keep your fridge on. You know, if you're on a prepayment meter, for example, and you run out of power, everything goes off and anything you have in the freezer is spoiled as well. You know, these results are they're lethal, in fact, and it's way, way beyond uncomfortable. And the people who are going to be suffering from it are not the ones who've been responsible for keeping us dependent on gas, which everybody knows has to go. We should have been switching to renewables years ago. And I don't agree with the last speaker. There's plenty of wind, sun, waves. We're an island, waves and tide. There's a lot that could be done and that hasn't been done. But the people who've kept us on that will not be the ones who are suffering from it, nor will the people who've been failing to insulate our houses, and nor will the people who've kept us with a pricing framework, which means that the people who have least and the people who use the least energy actually pay the highest price. I mean, we think, you know, Fuel Poverty Action, we're a small organization, we're unfunded. We've presently got a crowdfunder going on our website if anybody'd like to help out. But we want the framework changed so that everybody gets a free band of energy or some other means is found to ensure that the people who have least to begin with don't end up paying more than the people with most. We think that's basic. And the government, which is not constrained like we are, you know, in terms of the resources to work that kind of thing out. The government should be looking into that, and they should have looked into it a long time ago, frankly. And in the meantime, there's a lot of people who've made huge profits during the pandemic and a lot of wealth accumulated at the top end of the income scale, you know, that could be used to make sure that the lights stay on, not just for the country as a whole, but for people who can't afford to keep them on.
But in terms of how we move forward as a country, I mean, some of the blame has been put on wind. You know, you're right, we do have good wind supplies from time to time, but it is rather mercurial. When the wind doesn't blow, we don't get the energy. What's your position on, a lot of my guests today have posited nuclear as a solution, whether that's building big nuclear power stations or investing in technology such as small modular reactors. Are you pro-nuclear?
People have been very worried about nuclear for a long time because it's not safe. And, you know, you talk about terrorism and you talk about accidents and you talk about what's going to happen with the waste. And for very good reasons, people turned away from nuclear, and that's why it hasn't been developed to the extent that it might have been. And where it has, the cost has been astronomical. And we have seen contracts written in where people are expected to pay huge additional sums on their bills to develop nuclear power, whereas the renewable energy that's available would not take as long to create, would not cost as much, and would be overall reliable. Of course, you do need some forms of battery storage, and you do need to be able to switch between, for instance, the wind one time and the sun another time and the tides another time. The tides are pretty reliable, I understand. You know, there's a lot that could be developed and that hasn't been developed. Meanwhile, huge subsidies have been going into fossil fuels, even at a time when we all know that it's devastating the climate. And the climate, you know, climate change is killing as well. And it's also costing. And it also pushes up food prices.
Ruth, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, it looks like we're going to have a difficult few months ahead of us. So you're going to be kept rather busy there. That's Ruth London.
We certainly are. But, you know, I think it's important to note that people will not necessarily put up with it. You know, the Prime Minister likes to be positive and think that everything will turn out all right. But people are kind of reaching a limit because they're seeing their children go cold and hungry. And people don't take that lightly.
That they don't. No, indeed. I mean, you know, you're quite right. People's real life experiences will have a huge effect on how they feel about the actions of this government. That's Ruth London from Fuel Poverty Action.